when he went back to work, he was employed by the state as an engineer with the Water Resources Division. And he had to go out and measure the water in rivers and all over the state. So he was out a lot. And we were there 5 years and had 4 children. We had Carmen, John, Fred, and Sarah. And Fred was being asked to preach so much at different churches that he stayed busy on weekends and nights. And I asked him, what are you going to do when you get so many calls to preach that you can't fill them all and keep your job? He said, I'll just quit my job. So he did that. And he wrote some letters to friends, but made no permanent arrangements with salary, with money coming in. We sold the house. Well, he went off to preach before we sold the place, and I was left in the city again. This time we had 8 children, and he was down in Arkansas preaching, and I sold the house. I had people coming in. The June of that year was a little bit like the June of this year. I can remember it raining every day, and I didn't have a dryer. And I had 3 kids with whooping cough, and they would throw up, when they got to coughing, and I would soil the bed. I'd get a call from the real estate man that he was bringing somebody in to see the house. Then you didn't move out. You just stayed in, and they showed your house. So this guy, he brought a few people, and we showed the house a little bit, and I ended up selling it to the neighbor for the amount of money that we wanted for it. The neighbor across the street bought it. So he comes along and wants his percentage, because he was a real estate dealer. And I was never very positive. I just kind of took things along as they happened. But I looked at him and I said, you don't get a penny. I sold this house. Your time ran out. You have nothing coming from me. I sold this house. I let him know in a hurry. So we had come out and found the old place in south of Edmond, 3 miles south of Edmond. There was 40 acres of land that 8 doctors bought at the end of World War I, and they tracked it off, and we bought the largest tract of the 8 tracts that they put on the 40 acres, and it was called Reveille Retreat. So we settled in, and kids all started to school at Edmond, and Fred preached all over the country. He went up into Canada, preached a lot over in Arkansas. The kids all got into school, and we had 3 more children. We had Mark and Ruth and Rachel. So I've divided the kids in groups. The first 4 was our pre-war bunch. And then came our post-war. And then came the preacher's kids. So we ended up with 11. We had 11 kids. And we got started at the Edmond school. And in 1950, we moved out to the country and took Edmond as our hometown. And my mom and dad sold their property in Texas and moved up into a little cottage on the place. And the first thing we knew, we had a cow and a horse and a pig. And Pop had a garden, and he built Nanny a little brooder house, and she always had a garden and chickens. So she raised chickens. And the little cottage had a basement, and Dad bought a freezer and put in the basement. And Mom, every spring, Mom would dress 200 chickens, store them in the basement. And we lived well. Nanny had a garden, and Pop worked the garden too. But I can remember one time that Fred was gone. I don't know where he was. It seemed like he was up in Kansas. And we ran out of money. I didn't have any grocery money. And I told Ronnie and Starley, now we need to do some praying because we need some grocery money. And I can remember how big their eyes got when they looked at me. I don't know what they were thinking, but I know what I was thinking. We got a need here. And that was the only time Fred preached for 20 years. That was the only revival that a church stopped in the middle. Back then, he held 2 weeks revivals. And the church, in the middle of that revival, they took an offering, gave Fred the offering, and he sent it home. And we had grocery money. And he was asked many, many times when somebody would contact him for a revival meeting. They would ask him, what is your honorarium? And he would say, I have no honorarium. You just let the people give what the Lord leads them to give. And I can remember one time he went to California and held a meeting and rode the train out there and stayed 2 weeks. And the offering just barely paid for his plane fare. But we never went hungry. We didn't ever have much money in the bank, but we survived. And the kids had friends that thought we were wealthy. They thought we had a whole lot more than we had.